They called it the first true submarine of the United States Navy. But before the Holland surfaced in the late 19th century, Americans had already experimented with undersea vessels for well over a century. It all started with a contraption named Turtle in 1775, a rudimentary submersible designed during the American Revolution. While Turtle never achieved what its creators hoped, it planted the seed of possibility for the wonders lurking beneath the waves. By the end of the 1800s, the United States was on the verge of a naval transformation, thanks to visionaries who saw beyond the horizon and into the depths below. In 1897, a groundbreaking craft was launched at the Crescent Shipyard in Elizabeth, New Jersey. Constructed under the direction of John Philip Holland, it was first known as Holland 6. This small yet daring submarine was set to challenge all traditional notions of naval warfare. Bold in concept and form, it measured close to 53 feet in length from bow to stern. It housed a conning tower that allowed its operators to see above the surface. Though overshadowed by many larger naval ships moored in the same harbor, this compact undersea vessel was destined to leave an indelible mark on maritime history. Engineers of the day marveled at the challenge of making a sealed craft that could navigate an attack hidden from enemy sight. Holland 6 was not the world's first attempt, but it quickly earned a reputation as one of the most promising. John Philip Holland himself stood out as a man obsessed with perfecting the submarine. Born in Ireland, he had cultivated a deep fascination for the potential of underwater vessels from early adulthood. In America, he formed the Holland Torpedo Boat Company. With the financial and logistical help of Navy Lieutenant Lewis Nixon and the skilled workforce at Crescent Shipyard, he refined the creation that would be named the Holland. In these final decades of the 19th century, the world's navies were racing to harness the ocean's surface. Few dared to think about what might happen beneath it. Holland, however, believed that undersea warfare was not just a distant dream. It was inevitable. On 17 May 1897, construction culminated in the official launch of Holland 6. The date was marked by excitement and curiosity as onlookers lined the shipyard. Drifting down the ways and into the water, this unassuming craft proved that the next chapter of naval combat was about to be written. At the time, it ran with an internal combustion engine on the surface and relied on battery power when submerged. This dual propulsion system was a testament to Holland's forward-thinking engineering. The vessel could move at about 6 knots on the surface, roughly the same as 7 miles per hour, and slightly slower underwater. Though these speeds might seem sluggish compared to modern nuclear submarines, it was quite an achievement for a boat that fit only a handful of crew members. Throughout the trials in 1899 and into 1900, testing took place at the Holland Torpedo Boat Station. These test runs established her diving capabilities, her trim controls, and her torpedo system's reliability. The submarine also boasted a reloadable 18-inch torpedo tube that could fire Whitehead Mark II torpedoes, a formidable new threat. In an era when battleships with massive guns took center stage, the idea of a small vessel lurking unseen just beneath the surface shook standard naval doctrine. The team at Crescent Shipyard refined the design, ensuring that each mechanical part functioned flawlessly. That sense of urgency was partly driven by competition with other inventors. Submarine technology was a field brimming with dreamers worldwide, each hoping to impress a major navy with a workable design. Then, on 11 April 1900, the U.S. government purchased the Holland for $150,000. The U.S. Navy realized the boat's potential after witnessing test demonstrations that proved it could dive and maneuver effectively. Submarines, however, were not an entirely new idea. Propeller, also known as alligator, had once belonged to the Navy, and other experimental craft, such as Intelligent Whale and an earlier vessel named Plunger, had been tested. Still, none had matched the operational prowess or reliability demonstrated by Holland 6. In recognition of that breakthrough, it became known within Navy circles simply as Holland. Eventually retroactively deemed SS-1, though at the time it went by Submarine 1 or S1 under older designation systems. Officially, she was commissioned on 12 October 1900 at Newport, Rhode Island, with Lieutenant Harry H. Caldwell taking command. Lieutenant Caldwell's leadership marked a turning point for submarine warfare in the Navy. When you imagine commanding a brand new submarine in 1900, picture the sense of both thrill and dread. The concept was unproven in live combat, and routine tasks such as monitoring underwater pressure, ensuring adequate air supply, and managing flammable gasoline engines were precarious. Crews had to trust the complex array of pipes, valves, and gauges that kept the boat balanced below the waves. Months of practice dives refined each procedure. One miscalculation in the ballast system could result in a dangerous plunge into the depths beyond the submarine's safety limit of about 75 feet. By the late fall of 1900, the Navy decided to move Holland from Newport to Annapolis, Maryland, so that her equipment and crew could remain active even during the colder winter months. On 16 October 1900, the tugboat Layden towed her into the Chesapeake Bay. Although the vessel could have theoretically made the trip under her own power, the Navy was still cautious, preferring not to risk engine damage or the hazards of untested extended journeys. Despite the precaution, these voyages provided valuable data on her performance, fuel consumption, and mechanical resilience. Submarines were no longer mere curiosities. They were gradually integrating into Navy operations. At Annapolis, Holland served as the Navy's primary training submarine. Midshipmen at the United States Naval Academy eagerly climbed aboard this pioneering craft, learning skills that would have eventually become standard for submariners worldwide. It was a living laboratory where officers and enlisted men practiced diving, surfacing, launching torpedoes, and carefully balancing the boat. Because the submarine was so small, it forced its crew to act as a tight-knit team. Each person needed to know multiple tasks, from handling the torpedo tube to manning the helm. The U.S. Navy saw the potential for expansion, so more submarines were soon on order. These vessels would form the Plunger class, effectively America's first operational submarine fleet. Even so, the Holland submarine remained a one-of-a-kind testament to John Philip Holland's belief in efficient design. The craft's hull included a conning tower that offered a vital vantage point. It mounted an 8.4-inch pneumatic dynamite gun in the bow, one that launched so-called aerial torpedoes, basically explosive charges propelled by compressed air. At first, a second dynamite gun was installed near the stern, but it was removed in 1900 to accommodate an improved engine exhaust system. The Navy, while still experimenting with these new forms of weaponry, appreciated the submarine's potential to disable larger surface vessels. Inside the hull, a 4-stroke auto gasoline engine of about 45 horsepower propelled the boat on the surface and charged the 66-cell Exide battery pack. Once submerged, a 50-horsepower electric motor took over, running silently beneath the waves. Each system had to be carefully monitored, as battery acid, gasoline fumes, and potential water leaks could combine into a dangerous brew. Even under ideal conditions, early submariners faced hazards unimaginable to most surface sailors. Oxygen was limited, and the dense air below the waterline was often hot and stale. For these reasons, the submarine seldom stayed underwater for very long in early training evolutions, surfacing often to refresh air and check equipment. Despite its challenges, the Holland was more successful in operation than any undersea craft that came before it. Submarine warfare promised a stealth advantage that no battleship or cruiser could match. With a few men and a torpedo, one could theoretically neutralize a massive warship worth millions of dollars. Such a shift in power dynamics made navies worldwide take notice. Yet innovation rarely moves in a straight line. European powers, as well as Japan, were also exploring submarine designs, each seeking to protect their coastlines or project power across the seas. Holland's greatest contribution was proving that these ideas could be turned into a practical reality. During her time at Annapolis, the Holland carried out numerous training dives. Midshipmen who had never experienced a submarine's cramped interior now learned what it felt like to seal a hatch and sink below the waves. They gained hands-on familiarity with new concepts, neutral buoyancy, trim adjustments, and submerged navigation by compass. These lessons would soon be transferred to the next generation of submarines, which would boast greater range, larger torpedo capacity, and better underwater endurance. From 1900 to 1901, the submarine became a fixture at the Naval Academy, offering many officers their first glimpse into the future of naval warfare. Though the Holland primarily focused on training, it also participated in experimental runs. In January 1901, the boat took a trip from Annapolis to Norfolk, Virginia. Over 2 days, it covered roughly 166 miles on the surface, pushing its engine and battery systems to the limit. This journey taught the Navy valuable lessons about submarine endurance, comfort, and reliability over extended distances. Each recorded bit of data shaped design improvements in subsequent submarines. Engineers recognized that, while short coastal runs were feasible, submarines that ventured into the open ocean required more robust engines and better ventilation. When summer arrived, the Navy decided to send the Holland up to Newport, Rhode Island, from mid-June to early October 1901. There, she contributed to torpedo training for cadets at the Naval Torpedo Station. Although overshadowed by the more established surface fleet, her presence reminded all who saw her that the Navy's future depended on constantly adapting to new technologies. After that summer, the little submarine returned to Annapolis, serving faithfully as a training platform for the next few years. By 17 July 1905, the Navy determined the Holland's capabilities were outpaced by newer models. Submarine design was moving forward rapidly, and more advanced boats were coming off the slipways. So they decommissioned Holland, placing her in reserve at Norfolk, Virginia. 5 years later, in 1910, her name was officially struck from the Naval Vessel Register, ending her official status as a U.S. Navy ship. By then, her legacy was already secure, as younger, faster, and more capable submarines took her place. She had done her part by demonstrating what a true submarine could do. In many ways, she was a stepping stone that guided engineers and naval strategists toward the advanced undersea fleets that would become common in the 20th century. Eventually, the Navy sold her to Henry A. Hittner and Sons in Philadelphia in June 1913 for $100, with a $5,000 bond requirement that assured the submarine would be scrapped rather than reused. Perhaps it seemed an ignoble end for such a revolutionary vessel, but by that time, the allure of submarines had expanded far beyond a single prototype. Ships of the plunger class, followed by even more sophisticated designs, had proven the submarine's worth. Holland, stripped of her operational gear, found her hull passed between private hands. Around 1915, Peter J. Gibbons acquired what was left. By October 1916, she was on display in Philadelphia, drawing curious crowds who marveled at the small craft that had once signaled a new era in naval warfare. In May 1917, the Hulk was transported to the Bronx in New York for an exposition that showcased advances in science, arts, and industries. This event gave the public another chance to see firsthand how a once top-secret military invention had become a piece of American maritime heritage. Pride and nostalgia blended together as families walked around the submarine, peering inside its hollowed-out shell. Although many of her original parts were gone, the vessel's shape still evoked the daring spirit of her inventor. For a time, the submarine was displayed in Paterson, New Jersey, where John Philip Holland had lived and worked. People who admired inventive minds flocked to see the partially dismantled craft. School children, civic groups, and curious travelers gathered to hear stories of how this humble boat gave birth to entire undersea fleets. Some accounts told of the boat's cramped quarters, its distinctive smell of gasoline and oil, and the intense claustrophobia of being sealed inside. Others marveled that so small a vessel could launch torpedoes powerful enough to challenge large warships. In an era bursting with fresh inventions, from the telephone to the automobile, the submarine still held a special place in the collective imagination. Eventually, in 1932, what remained of the Holland was scrapped for good. Economic pressures of the Great Depression likely contributed to its final demise. Still, the submarine had long fulfilled its mission of proving that undersea warfare was viable. By that time, the U.S. Navy had already taken submarines to new heights of sophistication, culminating in substantial roles during World War I and later an even larger role in World War II. From the time it was purchased in 1900 through two major world conflicts, the American submarine force grew steadily, refining stealth, firepower, and endurance. Each generation owes a nod of gratitude to the original boat that made it all possible. Today, the Holland's story might not be as widely told as some grand battleships or aircraft carriers, yet its impact is undeniable. The notion that a handful of men, tucked away in a steel hull under the surface of the ocean, could threaten colossal battleships worth millions of dollars heralded a seismic shift in naval power dynamics. Admirals who once scoffed at the idea of underwater craft were forced to recognize a future where surface supremacy was no longer guaranteed. For historians, it is an illustrative example of how perseverance, creative thinking, and meticulous testing can spark a permanent transformation in military technology. In reflecting on Holland's journey, we also honor the dedication of those who risked their lives in the cramped experimental submarine. The crew members, many of them new to the concept of diving beneath the surface of the ocean, had to trust not only the hull's integrity, but also the designer's calculations that they would resurface safely. Their expertise formed the seed of the modern submarine service, which expanded to include a rigorous selection process, specialized submarine schools, and a host of advanced systems. By the dawn of the 20th century, the world's militaries had to admit that the game had changed. No longer would war at sea be the exclusive domain of floating fortresses with massive guns. Now stealth, agility, and surprise would define a new dimension of naval operations. And at the center of that shift was a small steel-bodied boat called Holland. Although her original structure was eventually lost to scrapping, her legacy lives on in each modern submarine that slips beneath the waterline with lethal discretion. Submarine warfare in World War II would prove decisive in numerous theaters, from the Pacific to the Atlantic, confirming the potential that John Philip Holland had championed decades earlier. It is easy to overlook these early forays into undersea warfare when discussing the massive submarine campaigns of World War II, or the nuclear giants patrolling the seas in later decades. Yet, these mighty successors trace their lineage back to that tiny trailblazer from the late 1800s, a vessel that overcame cynicism, mechanical pitfalls, and the unrelenting pressure of the ocean itself. Every torpedo tube on a modern submarine, every ballast tank, and every sonar ping has roots in the conceptual framework laid down by pioneers like Holland. His boat was not merely a historical footnote, it was the threshold to a whole new realm of possibility. As we stand in an age when submarines can remain submerged for months and travel under polar ice caps, we might marvel at how quickly technology evolves. The Holland's story shows us the excitement and peril of an era when submarines were still unproven, and those who championed them were ridiculed by many in power. We appreciate how the steadfastness of John Philip Holland and his collaborators, along with the courage of the submariners who guided that early boat, charted a course into uncharted underwater frontiers. To anyone intrigued by the dawn of submarine technology, the Holland remains a beacon. Her story illuminates the transition from theoretical sketches to actionable war machines. It also reminds us that every innovation, no matter how advanced, begins with the unwavering confidence of a few dreamers. In the case of the Holland, that confidence led to a revolution beneath the waves. A revolution whose echoes are heard every time a modern submarine slips quietly into the ocean. That is the enduring significance of the Holland submarine, a modest but monumental step toward the sophisticated undersea forces that would become decisive in conflicts worldwide. It stands as proof that a simple concept, well executed, can upend the balance of power at sea. More than a mere curiosity, the Holland was the spark that ignited America's future in submarine warfare. Submarines like the Holland set the stage for tactics that would later shape pivotal maritime battles in World War II. If you love discovering lesser-known World War II stories and want more deep dives into naval innovations, come along for the ride. Together, let us unveil more chapters of history once hidden beneath the surface. Share this journey with a friend who enjoys exploring the roots of modern military developments. And stay tuned for our next exploration You never know what piece of the past we will bring to light next.